For generations, Canadian families passed down winter survival knowledge that made modern safety experts cringe, wrapping children in newspaper, burning alcohol indoors, sleeping in snowbanks. These practices seemed primitive, even deadly. Parents were told to abandon these old ways for modern methods. But something unexpected happened. When researchers began studying traditional cold weather survival, they discovered our grandparents weren't reckless at all. They were practicing sophisticated thermodynamics and biology, knowledge gained through lived experience. Science has now proven these 25 dangerous Canadian winter tricks were actually strokes of pure genius. Let's start with something that seemed counterintuitive to modern sensibilities. Our grandparents would stuff newspaper between layers of their clothing, crumpling pages against their chests and wrapping sheets around their legs before pulling on outer garments. Safety experts warned this was a fire hazard and said it offered inferior protection compared to proper insulation. But thermal engineers at the University of Alberta recently confirmed what prairie families knew for generations. Crumpled newspaper creates thousands of tiny air pockets, and trapped air is one of nature's finest insulators. The same principle makes down jackets effective. A layer of newspaper could increase thermal retention by up to 40%. Those families were not being cheap or careless. They were applying physics. The practice of rubbing animal fat on exposed skin drew particular criticism from modern dermatologists. Many assumed it clogged pores, caused infections, and offered no real protection. Research published in the Canadian Journal of Dermatology tells a different story. Animal fats create a hydrophobic barrier that prevents moisture loss, the primary mechanism of frostbite damage. Indigenous communities across northern Canada refined this technique over thousands of years using rendered bear fat, seal oil, and caribou tallow depending on regional availability. The fats also contained fat-soluble vitamins that nourished wind-damaged skin. Modern petroleum-based products work on the same principle, just without the nutritional benefits. Reading weather through animal behavior was dismissed as superstition until meteorologists began systematic observation. Our grandparents knew that when birds flew low and cattle clustered together facing the same direction, a storm was approaching. Horses would become restless. Dogs would seek shelter hours before humans noticed any change. Scientists now understand these animals detect barometric pressure changes through specialized sensory organs. A 2019 study found that cows predict precipitation with 87% accuracy up to 12 hours in advance. Our grandparents could not explain the mechanism, but they trusted the observation. That trust kept families alive. Hot stones served multiple purposes beyond simple bed warming. Families would heat large flat stones on the wood stove throughout the day, then wrap them in flannel and distribute them throughout the house before sleep. Children received stones at their feet. The elderly got them against their backs. Our grandparents discovered something else. Placing heated stones beneath water buckets prevented overnight freezing, ensuring drinking water remained available. Stones tucked into coat pockets provided portable warmth during barn chores. The thermal mass of granite holds heat for 8 to 10 hours, far longer than hot water bottles. Mining communities in northern Ontario formalized this practice, with families maintaining specific heating stones passed down through generations. Sleeping in hay or straw struck modern observers as unsanitary and potentially dangerous. Hay fires were a real concern, and surely sleeping in agricultural materials exposed people to allergens and pests. Yet, agricultural scientists now recognize that properly dried hay creates exceptional insulation with R values comparable to modern synthetic materials. The hollow structure of hay stems traps air while wicking moisture away from the body. During the brutal winter of 1947, when temperatures in Saskatchewan plunged to -50, dozens of families survived by burrowing into hay storage, when their heating systems failed. The hay maintained survivable temperatures, even as the air outside became lethal, and for many, it was a matter of survival. Community ice harvesting brought neighbors together for what seemed like dangerous work on frozen lakes. Men would cut massive blocks from the ice surface, hauling them to shore where they would be packed in sawdust and stored through summer. Modern safety officials viewed the practice as reckless, citing drowning risks and hypothermia concerns. But these communities developed sophisticated ice reading techniques passed down through generations. They knew exactly how thick ice needed to be for safe travel, which areas concealed dangerous currents, and how to recognize warning signs of structural weakness. The harvested ice kept food preserved for months, preventing illness related to spoilage that killed far more people than ice harvesting accidents ever did. Section 1 of 3. The rules around eating snow confused many modern survival instructors. Some grandparents insisted you should never eat snow directly, while others taught children to consume it freely. Scientists have now clarified that both perspectives held real wisdom. Eating large quantities of snow rapidly lowers core body temperature, and that can be dangerous. However, small amounts held in the mouth until melted provide safe hydration. The key was pacing, something our grandparents understood intuitively. They would pack snow into containers, tuck them inside their coats, and let body heat do the melting work. This produced drinkable water without thermal shock to the system. Arctic researchers now teach this exact technique in professional survival courses. Kerosene lamp placement followed precise rules that seemed arbitrary to outside observers. Grandparents insisted lamps belonged in specific locations, and they moved them according to time of day and outdoor temperature. Fire safety experts dismiss this as superstition. Thermal mapping studies reveal the genius. Strategic lamp placement created convection currents that distributed heat throughout a home far more effectively than random positioning. A single lamp placed near a doorway could prevent cold air infiltration while warming the entry zone. Lamps positioned near interior walls at night would radiate heat across sleeping areas. Our grandparents were practicing thermodynamics without the vocabulary to describe it. Root cellars operated on principles that food scientists dismissed as inadequate for modern safety standards. These underground chambers maintained temperatures between 35 to 40 degrees year-round, supposedly too warm for safe long-term storage. But traditional root cellar design incorporated ventilation systems, humidity control, and strategic positioning that modern refrigeration engineers now recognize as remarkably sophisticated. The constant earth temperature provided free, reliable preservation. Families stored thousands of pounds of vegetables through winters lasting 6 months. Food waste was virtually unknown. Modern homesteaders are now building root cellars based on historical Canadian designs, recognizing their efficiency and sustainability. Burying food caches in specific locations seemed primitive compared to modern food storage. Our grandparents wrapped provisions in oilcloth, packed them in wooden boxes, and buried them at precise depths, marked with cairns or distinctive natural features. Studies by wildlife biologists found that these methods prevented animal predation more effectively than many modern bear-proof containers. The depth calculations accounted for frost penetration, and the wrapping methods prevented moisture damage. Some families maintained cache maps passed down through generations, preserving not just food, but the knowledge of where survival supplies waited if needed. Vehicle winterization with unusual materials drew ridicule from automotive experts. Grandparents would stuff cardboard behind radiator grills, pour kerosene into gas tanks, and wrap engines in old blankets overnight. Each practice had scientific validity. Cardboard blocking prevents overcooling of engines in extreme temperatures, a technique trucking companies still use in northern regions. Small amounts of kerosene prevented fuel line freezing before modern additives existed. Engine blankets retained heat, allowing easier morning starts. A 2018 study found that traditional winterization methods reduced cold start failures by 63% compared to vehicles without such preparation. Emergency signaling techniques varied by region, but all shared common principles that modern search teams now endorse. Families created smoke signals using materials that produce visible plumes against snow-white backgrounds. They arranged rocks or debris in patterns visible from the air. At night, they positioned fires to maximize visibility while conserving fuel. The pattern of 3 signals, 3 fires, 3 horn blasts, 3 of anything, originated in indigenous communication systems and was adopted by European settlers. This universal distress signal remains the international standard today because our grandparents proved its effectiveness through countless successful rescues. The use of alcohol as emergency fuel rather than drinking it for warmth represented hard-won survival wisdom. Medical doctors warn that alcohol consumption accelerates hypothermia by dilating blood vessels and increasing heat loss. Our grandparents knew this truth long before scientific explanation. Instead, they used high-proof spirits to fuel small stoves, start stubborn fires, and serve as an antiseptic for cold-related injuries. A bottle of whiskey in the emergency kit was not for drinking. It was survival equipment. The thermal output from burning alcohol provided enough heat to warm frozen hands and melt emergency drinking water. Snow shelter construction techniques that parents explicitly taught their children seemed terrifying to modern safety advocates. Digging into snowbanks, sleeping in snow caves, building quinzees from piled snow felt like inviting hypothermia. But survival researchers measuring temperatures inside traditional snow shelters discovered consistent readings of 25 to 32 degrees Fahrenheit regardless of outside conditions. Snow insulates brilliantly, with an R value of roughly 1 per inch. A properly constructed snow shelter protects occupants from wind, preserves body heat, and has saved countless lives during unexpected blizzards. Canadian Rangers still teach these techniques to military personnel operating in Arctic conditions. Controlled fire in enclosed spaces required knowledge that used to make fire departments nervous. Our grandparents burned small fires inside snow shelters, root cellars, and even vehicles during emergencies, carefully managing ventilation with specific techniques. A candle burning inside a coffee can could prevent freezing in a stranded car overnight. A tiny fire at a snow shelter entrance, placed to draw smoke outward, provided life-saving warmth. The key was understanding combustion needs, a skill every child learned before modern heating systems made the knowledge seem obsolete. Fire safety experts now acknowledge that properly managed emergency fires save more lives than the risks they pose. Navigation without instruments relied on observation skills, which often seemed impossible to verify. Our grandparents could determine direction from tree growth patterns, from snow drifts, and from the positions of stars. They read the land in ways the global positioning system has made unnecessary. Yet backcountry rescue teams report that traditional navigation skills outperform technology when batteries die and satellites lose signal. Moss growth can indicate direction. Prevailing winds create predictable snow patterns. The North Star has not moved in millennia. These techniques are not folklore. They are applied astronomy and botany, practices our grandparents used every day. Group sleeping configurations followed strict rules about positioning that modern families found peculiar. Children always slept in the middle. The elderly took positions nearest the heat source, and healthy adults took the exposed edges. This was not just courtesy, it was practical thermal engineering. Children lose body heat faster because of their higher surface area to mass ratio. Elderly individuals have compromised thermoregulation, positioning family members according to their thermal vulnerability maximized the group's chance of survival. The warmth generated by healthy adults literally wrapped around those who needed protection most. Modern hypothermia research confirms this traditional arrangement is optimal for group survival. Reading ice safety involved knowledge that saved countless lives on frozen lakes and rivers. Our grandparents taught specific rules about ice thickness, color, and sound. Blue ice was strong, and white ice contained air pockets and was weaker. If ice crackled or groaned, it was actively forming or deteriorating, and it required extreme caution. 2 inches of ice support a single person. 4 inches allow small groups on foot. 8 inches can accommodate vehicles. These measurements, passed down verbally for generations, match engineering calculations published in modern ice safety manuals. Our grandparents had the data. They gathered it through experience rather than laboratory testing. Community warning systems predated any formal emergency services. When blizzards approached, neighbors would check on each other along established routes. Specific signals indicated safety or distress. A lantern in the window meant all was well. No light meant someone needed to investigate. Rope lines strung between buildings prevented disorientation during whiteout conditions. These systems saved lives that modern emergency services, arriving hours later from distant towns, never could have reached in time. Rural communities are now reviving these mutual aid networks, recognizing that technology does not always arrive faster than a neighbor. The knowledge passed through generations carried more than technique. It carried the understanding that survival depends on community, preparation, and respect for nature's power. Our grandparents did not fight winter, they learned to live within its rules, developing practices refined through countless seasons of trial and harsh consequence. What modern experts dismissed as dangerous superstition was actually accumulated wisdom, tested by the most demanding conditions on Earth. Science has now validated what Canadian families knew all along. These were not reckless folk remedies, they were sophisticated survival strategies, hidden in plain sight. If these 25 tricks taught you something new, give this video a like and share it with someone who remembers when this knowledge was common sense. Subscribe for more journeys into the wisdom our grandparents understood. The old ways were not just about survival, they were about thriving through whatever winter brought. Together,